guys? Welcome to the ACE It podcast. My name is Bauer Brown, co-founder, lead instructor of ACE Interdiction Tactics, one of law enforcement's fastest growing training companies in the nation, specializing in bringing our cops some of the best proactive training. If you have not checked out any of our classes, go to aceinterdiction.com, look at the list of classes that we have coming up, get registered, and make yourself better.
Welcome, everybody, to the ACE It podcast. My name is Bauer Brown, co-founder, lead instructor. Here we have Al Clark, co-founder, instructor with ACE Interdiction Tactics. And we have one of the best in the business when it comes to compartments, Jeremy Bedingfield, street cop instructor. And I imagine that this is the guy that when somebody doesn't call or somebody doesn't find a compartment, they're like, hey, get Jeremy Bedingfield on the phone and get him down here. And he shows up as like the save the day guy. So with that being said, man, introduce yourself. Tell us about you, your background, and what you're about, man.
You know, it's funny about that you bring it up is that was kind of like my goal when I started learning about compartments is there was a guy on my team that was getting ready to retire, and he was kind of like the go-to guy for compartments. And I knew when he retired, you know, everybody on the team is skilled, but nobody like really specialized in compartments. And so that was my thought is like, I want to be like the guy that people call, you know, if they can't find something. And so, yeah, it's gotten to that point. I've been pretty lucky that, you know, now I get calls all the time. A little bit about me. I work for a large department in the county of San Diego. You can probably put two and two together who I work for. I started off as a patrol deputy and worked my way up through a couple different proactive teams. And that's like the main thing about my career is I've always been proactive. I've never been the guy that just sits around and waits for radio calls. Being proactive is what got me on the team that I'm on now. I'm on a task force that does any border related crimes. But primarily we end up doing a lot of the higher level drug smuggling.
Perfect. So let's back up just a little bit for like some of our non-law enforcement listeners that are interested in becoming a cop and are listening to the podcast. Explain a little bit. We talked about how you're the compartment master. You're really good at finding compartments. Can you explain to us or explain to a person who doesn't know what that is, what we're talking about?
Yeah. So compartment is essentially, well, if you want to go very technical, a compartment is something that is added to a vehicle that's aftermarket. Something is modified and it's in the place of a void that already exists in a vehicle. So they modify that void to basically contain some type of contraband so that you can't see it. So it's hidden within the vehicle. The only thing that is not within the vehicle would maybe be a floor compartment where a box is added under the vehicle. And typically it's still accessed from the inside. But every once in a while they're accessed from underneath the vehicle. But yeah, it's essentially a void that's been modified. And when I teach hidden compartments, I'm not really necessarily teaching just something that's been modified. It's you got to search all the voids. Like that's my number one rule is you have to be able to know all the voids that are used, and you have to be able to know how to clear each and every single one of them.
Definitely. So essentially, you know, these people who are transporting drugs into the United States, across the United States, get creative in the way they hide this contraband, and they use all sorts of areas within this vehicle to hide it. And ultimately, when you've been doing this for a long time, you get pretty comfortable in saying, hey, look, you know, we got to make sure we check here. We got to check here. We know these voids are here. We're going to check here. And you get pretty comfortable in identifying some tactics that they use to conceal their dope. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about compartments. I thank you for that explanation, Jeremy. Let's back up now back to what you were saying. You got onto the task force. You became interested in interdiction. You were a more proactive cop. What was the point, or how did it happen when you kind of learned that there was more to the traffic stop? And hey, if I look into this a little bit deeper rather than just a ticket, I may uncover some criminal activity. Was there somebody in your career that taught you that? Did you attend training? And what took you from being that regular patrol officer to more on the interdiction side and hunting drugs during traffic stops?
So I've had mentors throughout my career in the patrol level, because the patrol level is really where it got started. The need to go out and hunt people that are involved in criminal activity is just very high in me. Like I absolutely love to go out and watch for people that are involved in all sorts of different activities. And everybody when they're on patrol loves to go out and get into pursuits and chase bad guys. And quite frankly, if you're just waiting for radio calls, you're going to have very few opportunities to chase bad guys. But if you're going out and you're observing people and you're paying attention to what they're doing, then you can find yourself in the position where you can actually put real bad guys in jail. And so that was my initial drive. Once I got onto the task force that I'm on, I started out initially in an investigative position. And so I was working what you might consider high-level informants or informants that are giving information on people that are smuggling big amounts of dope and people that are smuggling guns and money and that type of thing. And through those investigations, I started to realize how smuggling works across the United States. I started to learn it. I've flipped, 20 or 30 different people that I've worked with. But there's been two like primary guys that really taught me a lot about how drug trafficking organizations work. And so once I learned all that, my team, we do interdiction every once in a while. It's not an interdiction team, but usually once a week we would go out and hit the highways. And so knowing how smuggling works, I would go out, I would conduct a traffic stop, and then I would already know the right questions to ask, essentially, because I know what this person is probably going to do when they drive to the stash pad. If somebody is driving from A to B, we know that they're going to land in a parking lot, they're going to get a call, and somebody's going to come pick up the car and that type of thing. And so there's the right questions to ask to determine if they're involved in criminal activity. And so through those investigations is how I learned that there's really good questions you can ask, and you can determine that somebody's in criminal activity by just a few quick questions. In fact, you guys probably know better than I do. Usually within the first few questions, I pretty much have a good idea whether or not somebody's involved.
Yep. It's interesting that you talked about it, and this has been brought up on previous podcasts that we've done, but for me, I knew that there were people out there, like you and like Al, young in my career, that were putting, hundreds of pounds of dope on the hood of their car because of traffic stops. In my mind, it was like, oh, they stopped the car, they ran their dog around the car, the dog alerted, told them it was there, and they got the dope. That's what a lot of people think that's what interdiction is. But in reality, like you were saying, without going too much into a lot of the tactics used, it is kind of a science behind it, asking the right questions, learning how drug trafficking operations are doing their business and what they're involved in. And based on a couple of questions, it's pretty easy to come into reasonable suspicion that something's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because I get calls quite often about, hey, I have this car and I'm searching it, and can you help me out? And my first question is not like, what car do you have, or what are you seeing? It's, well, what do you have? Mm-hmm. Like, tell me the story. Like I want to know if you have a smuggler, really. Yep. Is like what I'm looking at, or I want to know what type of person you're dealing with. Are you dealing with a gangster? Yep. Are you dealing with somebody that's going to have a hidden compartment, or maybe they're just popping a panel and putting a gun somewhere? Yep. And so I even tell that to people in class. I'm like, I would love for you to call me, but my first question is going to be, what do you have? And so you better be able to answer those questions, or you need to be able to answer those questions, because a lot of times they're like, oh, well, the car's registered out of some random area that they find suspicious. And I'm like, well, that doesn't mean that it's dirty. Like I need more than that.
Yep. Yeah, we've run into that a couple of times. As an admin of a Facebook group, oftentimes I'm declining ATLs that are basically like, hey, I saw this dude getting a rental car at a gas station.
Yeah.
He's eastbound I-40. Be on the lookout, and it's like, what?
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more tactics, I would say, or science behind it, rather than just stopping a car and finding it. And that's why we go out there. That's why we teach. That's why you teach. Which, by the way, I'm going to bring up. Loved your class at the Street Cop Conference. If you guys haven't attended Jeremy's class, he goes in depth about these compartments, how to find them. You can go to all the interdiction classes you want, and you can be the best interviewer in the world and be super confident in your reasonable suspicion. But if you don't have a search car, you're stuck.
Right.
Yeah.
Kind of like Al talks about his story on 89, right? About how you didn't realize there was even powder on 89 because how would you search a car?
I would pop the trunk and look in there, and if there was no dope, they were down the road. And I was telling people, man, there's just marijuana on this road. There's nothing but weed.
Yeah.
And it's in the trunk. Well, then I got some proper training and learned how to search, and then right away I started hitting powder, and I was like, oh wow, you just got to search.
You got to search.
Yeah.
You got to know how to search.
Yeah. I mean, that's the biggest difference between a, low level crew and a high level crew is they're probably using compartments. Not all of them. You see people every once in a while, they hit 100 pounds of fentanyl in a trunk, but if you're hitting a even semi-sophisticated crew, you better believe that they're using compartments. At least they're using voids, and they're hiding it more than just in the trunk.
What's up, everybody? Bauer Brown from Ace Interdiction Tactics, lead instructor and co-founder. Just wanted to drop in and say, if you like what you hear and you're currently a sworn law enforcement officer, make sure to get registered for our 2-day interdiction tactics class. You can register for a class or request to host us in your state at aceinterdiction.com. While you're there, visit the Ace It merch store and grab some stickers, hats, shirts, or our brand new badass metal Miranda cards. These things will last you your entire career. Visit aceinterdiction.com. Tell us how we should probably be searching a vehicle, maybe a couple of things that we can look for. Give us a little bit of insight on that.
So when it comes to compartments, you have to understand that there's really only 3 ways they can exist in a vehicle. They can either exist in a natural void, meaning they're just exploiting the natural void, like say a door. They might pop the door panels off, they put dope inside, and they put the door panel right back on. They're not modifying anything. Sometimes there's not even really any tampering other than the moisture barrier that is on the inside of the door might be tampered with or ripped or something. But other than that, that's the type of void you just have to clear it. You have to look in at that point. Like I see some people, they're tapping on the outside of the door, and you might feel something every once in a while, but if there's just a single kilo in there, like you're going to miss that. So you just have to clear that. So that's one huge thing is if it's a void that you can see into, you should probably look into it if you don't want to miss things. So another way is a hidden compartment, like a void where they create a box or they build a box inside of a void that already exists in a car. And they try to make it, well, they don't always try to make it look good, but the better compartments, they try to make it look factory. So take a floor, for example. If you imagine where your feet sit on the floor, right under that is the carpet. And then usually under that is some type of padding or foam. And then under that is the metal floor pan of the vehicle. So there's a 2 or 3 inch gap between where your feet sit and the actual metal floor pan of the vehicle. So if they were to remove the foam or whatever padding and put a box in there and then some type of access point, that would be a hidden compartment inside of the floor. And so the carpet is not going to look any different. They're not going to raise the carpet up. Every once in a while they get greedy and they build a compartment that's bigger than they should have, and you can see that. Like I've posted, if people follow the social media, I've posted a couple of roof compartments where they built the roof down a little bit too far, and it causes creases around the roof that you can see just by walking up to the car. That happens every once in a while, but it's more rare. For the most part, if it's something like the floor, you're not going to be able to tell just by purely looking at it until you've hit a bunch of them. Like sometimes I'll look at it and I'll just tell that the floor's too flat. but like if somebody's never hit a floor trap before, I would never expect them to look at the floor and think, oh, the floor's too flat. You got to look again. It comes back to looking into the void. And so I teach people, you got to lift up the carpet and look. There's just no way around it. You hear about depth tests and all these other different methods, and there are other good methods out there. But for me, lift up the carpet and look in there and just see if it is factory or not. So that's another way. And then the third way that a compartment can exist is them building a box and basically creating a void. Usually what that means is something under the vehicle, because obviously if you built a box on the side or the top of the car, it would be pretty obvious. The only exception to that is maybe like a false wall in a pickup where you cover the false wall. That would be on the front of the bed of the pickup. They would create a false wall, and then they would put a toolbox there that would block the false wall. So that would be one exception to that rule. But for the most part, the natural voids, a box within a natural void, and then a box underneath the vehicle is how the compartments exist. So once you understand that concept, all you got to do is clear the voids. All you got to do is look into every void that you can look into. And you got to look for tampering, and you have to know what's normal and what's not normal. That's going to be the key. Like knowing what's normal and what's not normal is 100% the key, because you can look at a modified floor, and if you don't know what it should look like, you're not going to know that it's a compartment. There's a good chance. I posted one just recently that's a very obvious floor compartment. It's super flat. And there were several people that commented on there that it was a natural floor, and it just shows that they just don't know what it looks like. They need to go out and look at some floors.
Definitely the not normal and normal is the big one here, because let's take seam sealer for example. Was it you that may have posted this, or we get a lot of questions about it, and we get forwarded a lot of pictures that says, hey, I'm out with this vehicle, and they send me a picture of factory seam sealer, like,
yeah,
and they're like, there's no way this is factory, because you think about, that you take the carpet and you start looking at where it's put together, where these seams are placed together, and the seam sealer on top, it kind of looks somewhat sloppy in a way, right? From the factory. Right. It's just kind of like, and so automatically they're like, there's no way that this is factory. And so it's that realizing that, yes, this is normal, this is not normal, that's going to help you not get caught up in this. Oh, this looks abnormal, but in reality, it's normal.
And waste time searching something that they don't need to search.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's once somebody identifies an area, usually it's pretty easy to say, hey, send me a picture. Yeah. And you look at it and you're like, oh, no, that's not it. Or yeah, that's a compartment. It's pretty much that easy. It's once you educate yourself, it's really not that difficult to search a car, and you just have to take the time and do a good job and not half-ass it and actually look in all the voids. I know there's plenty of people out there that they'll stop a car and maybe they'll find something suspicious about the person or whatever reason they stopped the car for. And then they get an interview and they're like, I could see maybe they're smuggling. That person is probably not going to do a good job searching the car, because they're going to already be half in, half out, and they're going to clear a couple areas and be like, it's not here. And they're just going to move on. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if you're going to search a car, you should do a good job every single time. The time that you don't is when you're going to miss something. Like that's my goal walking away from every vehicle search, is knowing I didn't miss anything and my target selection was off, or something about the interview wasn't suspicious maybe, or maybe I just misread something. Like that's what's going to help me improve my interdiction game, is being consistent on my car searches. So I know I didn't miss anything, or at least I have a really good chance that I didn't miss anything. Obviously we all miss stuff. But that's what's going to help you improve interdiction, is knowing, oh yeah, I didn't miss it. Because how often do you hear somebody stop a car and they're like, oh yeah, everything was there, but I just didn't find it. I think I missed a trap. Mm-hmm. And to me, in my head, I'm like, well, why'd you miss a trap? Like, why didn't you educate yourself on traps before you're even wasting your time stopping all these cars? Like you can practice that every day at home. You can go to a junkyard and search a car and learn how to search a car. You don't even need a class. I teach a class on it and I'll help expedite it. But if you don't have the money to go to a class, or you don't have the time, or you just don't like me for whatever reason and you don't want to go to my class, then go to a junkyard and teach yourself how to search a car. It's really not that difficult. And you will improve your interdiction so much by that.
Absolutely. What type of, when you're searching a car, what type of tools do you use? Are you the type that takes up an entire toolkit? Or are you the pry bar guy or the flathead screwdriver guy with a flashlight?
I have a pry bar that I lose like once every 2 weeks. So I used to buy like the cool looking ones, the tactical ones with the paracord on them. They cost like 30 or 40 bucks. Now I'm using $9 upholstery tools because I just lose them so much. Like, it just is what it is. I'll be searching a car and I'll set it down, and next thing I know, the car's gone, and I'm like, oh, I lost my tool again. So I have a whole bunch of them, but I'm a flashlight and pry bar guy, primarily. And then the next most useful tool that I find is just an electric screwdriver, just to speed things up. I used to use like a Leatherman or a multi-tool on my vest to unscrew things, and it just takes way too long. I use like a Milwaukee electric screwdriver. I can take off a glove box real quick and look in there a lot better, and then put it back on nice and neat. So, but I carry everything in terms of tools. Like, my entire trunk is full. Sometimes I'll hit a load, I can't even fit the dope in my trunk because there's just no room. I gotta like call somebody else to transport, because I have all sorts of tools and like vehicle ramps and floor jack and like everything. So,
well, it's funny because I tell interdictors, I'm like, well, if you don't currently carry a screw gun in your car, electric screw gun in your car, you're going to, when you unscrew the screws in a subwoofer box. Why do they make those so long? Like, that should be a 1.5 inch screw, but they're 4 inches, and it's in wood, so you're just like cranking on it and cranking on it and cranking on it and cranking on it, and then you have 8 of them to remove, and that's if you can't see the actual void when you pull out the little where you actually connect the speaker or the connecting amp and all the wires. Oh my gosh, it's such a pain. I remember specifically like unscrewing 8 screws out of a 10-inch subwoofer. I'm like, now's the time that I'm going to buy a screw gun for sure.
Or what you'll do is you'll end up not clearing it. Right. You're like, oh, I don't want to take all those screws out. And you just screwed up because you left an area unchecked. My opinion. Yep. So
you bring up losing tools. I don't think I've ever lost one.
Gifts. I'm
the same way. So here's what's crazy that you bring that up is because like I have lost so many pry bars. I'm the same way. And Al Clark over here has had the same pry bar since 1964 or whenever it was that you started.
Yeah, it's my lucky pry bar. I hate to lose that,
dude. And every now and then, like, we'll be searching a car, and let's say he put it down and he loses it for 2 seconds. It's like full on panic. Like, gotta find it. Which is not often does he like put it down and loses it, but
it's happened.
He's got a lucky pry bar. Like he's shown me.
It's nice having the tactical vests now, so you can just throw it right on your vest, and it's a lot easier to not lose it.
Well, I think that should answer a lot of questions out there. I think a lot of times younger officers, especially when they get into interdiction, they think that they need some, spectacular toolkit to find some of these compartments. And that's just not the case in our experience, and clearly not the case in yours, being as your primary go-to tools are, a pry bar and a flashlight. But what they need to understand is that's what we use and you use to locate the compartment. You see,
right
now, when we need to tear into the compartment or get into the access panel or whatever it may be, then obviously we're going to use some different measures, maybe some more serious tools. And that's what we have those serious tools for most of the time.
Yeah. I always tell people you can find pretty much every single compartment with a pry bar and a flashlight. I can't even, I was just, while you've been talking about it, I was just trying to think of like a time where I used one of the more sophisticated tools to find a compartment that I hadn't already like identified. And I don't think I can even think of one.
Right.
Those other tools like an X-ray or a scope, they just help, confirm whether or not there's dope in there or whether or not something's loaded. But usually I've already seen it at that point. And I'm like, okay, the gas tank, for whatever reason, all the different signs for a gas tank I see, I think the gas tank's loaded. Then I'll scope it and confirm, or, use the X-ray to X-ray something just to confirm, like a tire before I cut into it. But I've already like identified it using just the basic tools. So it's pretty simple. You don't need anything fancy.
Nope, you don't. And while we're on the topic, we got to hear about your first trap. You got to tell your story really quick about the RV before, about the mess.
It's terrible.
It's not terrible.
Yeah, I stopped this RV and I got consent to search, but the guy was going around with me and he was opening the latch doors underneath. And we had started in the middle or wherever, and I could see it crossed. And he opens one door and it's like 4 inches in, and then there's a wall. And he hurries and closes it. And I saw caulking and black paint and whatever. Yeah. And I'm like, hey, wait a minute, open that back up. And I'm clueless. And it's my first. I mean, I think it was one of my first loads. Honestly, I think it was my first
like
load.
1967 or 66.
Yeah. Anyway, he opens it up, and I'm like, why is there a wall right there? That doesn't make any sense. Like, you can't even put anything in here. And he says, I don't know, but here, let's look it over here. And he tries to misdirect me. Long story short, I run the dog alerts on that door, and not knowing anything, I get a drill and I drill into the wall, and it comes out with marijuana on the bit. And I look at my sergeant and I'm like, I hit it. I finally got one. There's marijuana on the drill bit. And he says, I want proof. And I'm like, and he says, I need to see what it is that's in there. So, I mean, I kid you not, I commenced to beating this thing down, and it's welded. And a sledgehammer and pry bars, and it worked. I worked my ass off to get that wall knocked down. Only to find out that another guy that had a little bit of experience walked inside, lifted up the queen bed, hit a switch, lifted up the queen bed, and that was the access. I mean, it could have been done in a matter of seconds, and I was hours beating on that wall.
Yeah.
So, one thing I get from this, though, as we're talking about this searching of cars, there's no shortcuts.
No.
And that's what I get from what you're saying, Jeremy, is there's no shortcuts to this. I mean, a lot of guys, excuse me, they want to know what cars to stop and where the dope's at.
Yep.
And they want to learn that on YouTube or wherever, and they want to get there quick, and they want to rise and get famous and do well and have all this success. But in interdiction, it's hard work, and there's no shortcuts. I mean, there really isn't. I mean, even when you're searching a car, you make it sound simple. And you say, really, you shouldn't miss anything, but that's years of experience and that's education talking, but there's no shortcut. You still have to clear the box.
Yep.
Right.
And one of the things that he said too was like, it's relatively simple, but what it takes is time. And that's where everybody gets impatient. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's the truth right there is once you find the abnormal and normal, and once you get that knowledge down, it should be simple, but what's not simple is having the patience for the time to actually clear everything. So.
Right. And going through and I'm sure you can elaborate on this, but I found some that are a pain because of the way they set them up. They obstruct it with all kinds of clutter and crap, and you've got to clear most of the vehicle out or part of the vehicle out just to get to where you need to be. And the time, the energy, and getting dirty. I mean, these are things that defeat people.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Getting under cars. How about that? Like,
yeah,
that's to me, that's the biggest failure for most people searching cars is they don't get on the ground and crawl under the car. Like, my vest is completely dirty all the time. Every time I search a car, I go and I sit down in my car seat, and then I realize that there's like dirt falling down my pants and stuff. And it is what it is, because if you're not crawling under cars, you are absolutely missing stuff. Absolutely. You are missing compartments if you don't get under cars, and they'll pick cars that are low to the ground. Like, I have I have one that I traffic stopped this car and my dog banged it. The story was as good as it gets. So in my head, I'm like 100%, this car's loaded for sure. And I searched it for like 2.5 hours, could not find anything, like did everything that I could. And what it was is a firewall compartment that was accessed from underneath, where they built a box on the bottom of the firewall. And they protected it. Well, they didn't protect it, but it was naturally protected by this shroud that was on the undercarriage of the car. The only thing that you could see that, and the interesting thing about this is we've hit more since then, and you could see the box from the engine compartment, but this one you could not see the box from the engine compartment. Like the engine compartment was so tight that the only way you could see this compartment was from underneath, and the shroud blocks everything. The only thing that would lead you to finding that is the tooling on the bolts on the shroud. So ultimately I ended up letting the guy go. We got we started monitoring his travel electronically, and we figured out that this guy goes into a stash pad. He's in there 25 minutes and he's gone, or the car does. So we know, okay, 100%. Yeah, I missed something, and whatever I missed is accessed in 25 minutes. So like then the wheels start turning, and I'm like doing research on the car, and I ran a database. Well, my partner ran a database, a Homeland Security database for the border guys to say, hey, like this make, model, year, has it ever been stopped? And they had one car that they had interdicted or that was in their system, and it was a firewall compartment. So we're all like, oh, it's got to be the firewall. But that compartment was accessed from the top, the one that they had interdicted. So we go, the guy crosses the border, starts, we call it like tripping north, like driving towards LA. And we stop him. But this time I'm like, okay, I'm going to stop him next to a lift. So we wait until he gets to the Border Patrol checkpoint, traffic stop him, throw the car on the lift. And that's when we see it. We can see the tooling on the shroud at that point. We're like, okay, there's tooling there, take off the shroud. And then we could see the compartment from at that point. But the whole point of that is that I wasn't crawling under the car as good as I could have when I was out there. And it was a car that was low to the ground. And so ever since then, I now carry ramps where if it's a low enough car, this was a 2017 Acura ILX. If I have a car that is too low to the ground, I drive it up on the ramp so I can get under there safely and I can inspect the undercarriage if I need to. I mean, it's not too often that you really need that, but it's something that I have and that I've learned a lesson on.
Yeah, we recently had one where we had to use our our cell phones or whatever, where we put it up underneath a car because we can't get our head underneath there to inspect like underneath the firewall, for example, or the exhaust tunnel, rear bumpers, any of that, frame rails and different things like that. And so we've utilized our phones to record, and then we'll pull them back. Or you can sometimes just tilt your phone and be able to see like, oh, okay, there's definitely some type of modification there. So yeah, that's frustrating. And you're right. I think the game changed. I attended a class a long time ago, probably in 2016 or something. It was a compartment class, and it was Gino Rodriguez. I don't know if you work around him or know him, but he had taught a class, and he was talking about all these undercarriage vehicles. And I'm like, well, I was that guy that you were talking about. Like I rarely looked under the cars early in my interdiction career, and it's scary to think about how much stuff that I missed.
Yeah. I mean, I think all sorts of people are missing all sorts of compartments. I can't prove it because I don't work all over the country, but there's just so many different types of compartments out there. Like I started posting about roof traps and showing some videos, and then all of a sudden high level dudes are hitting roof traps, and they're like calling me and they're like, dude, I like was never looking at roofs before. And I'm like, I don't know, I hit roofs all the time. Like it's just so common here. Mm-hmm. It has to be common everywhere else, and now all of a sudden people are hitting them. So I think that it doesn't end there. It's not just roofs that people are missing. I think there's all sorts of different compartments that people are missing. And we've had some investigations that have taken us cross country, and so I know for a fact that there are certain traps that have traveled, all the way from where I work in San Diego to North Carolina to New York to Chicago, a bunch of cars to Chicago. It's not super common for a San Diego car to do that, but it is common for a Los Angeles car to do that.
Interesting.
So I know that there's high level compartments all around the country. And if you're only clearing a few different voids looking for the easy ones, you're going to miss something that's a little bit more sophisticated. There's certain engines that you can do intake manifold compartments on, and you could actually access them pretty quick. Within 30 minutes, you could have dope out and money in, and the car driving down the road. And who's going to find the intake manifold? There's probably a handful of people across the country that do. But other than that, most guys are not going to find that. Most guys aren't even going to look for it, for one. Like how many people stop cars, they don't even pop the hood.
Right.
There's all sorts of issues. But yeah.
On that note, Jeremy, like we as well have been seeing this happen where we hit compartments, and I hear this all the time. Well, it's, Southwest border compartments, like doesn't apply to me in Chicago. And it's like, well, I agree with you, Jeremy, that like, for example, the last one we hit was on their way to Chicago in a Chicago registered vehicle that would be considered a Southwest border compartment for most people. And they're all over.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because I talk about gas tanks because I think gas tanks are just huge and they're so easily exploited. You can put dope into a gas tank in just a few minutes. Especially if you're only putting in like 5 or 10 pounds into a gas tank, it is just so easy to exploit it. And I think it's something significant that people are missing. And everybody that I know, at least, or everything that I've ever heard is that's Southwest border. Like, you're not going to have a gas tank load cross country. You're not going to have a gas tank load wherever. Well, I saw just on the news the other day that some department in New York hit a gas tank load full of fentanyl, and Kenny Williams has talked about having a gas tank load out in his area, and I'm like, people are missing those for sure. And it's so easy to clear a gas tank. It takes you 30 seconds for the most part to clear that, or at least look for the tooling and the tampering, because they can't hide that on a gas tank. You just absolutely cannot hide the tooling. If they're accessing the sending unit, you're going to see it.
Yep.
So that's really why, like, I'm excited as the class goes along and more and more people go. I'm like, I hope that their eyes open up to all these different areas that they're probably missing.
I feel like sometimes us interdictors paint ourselves in a corner. We find success in a certain type of vehicle, a certain setup, a certain whatever, and we have success with that maybe a few times, and we're not looking at the Subaru, or we're not looking at a gas tank, or we're not looking at this because we've never hit it, and we kind of rule it out. We paint it out, or we put it off as, well, that's Southwest, or that's this. I've heard people say, Jersey area, they've got the compartments. We don't have them down here. We just have suicide loads, and on and on and on. But I believe you're right. I think we blow some minds if we could truly get some numbers on really what's going on out there.
Yeah.
Officers need to, especially people that are doing this and searching, need to keep I just think they need to be open-minded and think that this car could have it anywhere.
Yep.
And clear it all.
Right. Yeah. No, it's 100%. If you make a good stop based on, whatever reason, and you talk to the person and they're involved in criminal activity, and you think that, especially if you think that they're smuggling, it's like, you really need to search the car fully, because if it's any type of sophistication level above a marijuana smuggler, you're looking at the potential of a compartment. Like, it just is what it is. You have to be able to find them. Otherwise you're going to think that there's, you stopped them the wrong way or whatever. You're not going to know that it was a good stop.
Right.
Hey, man, in your experience of searching cars, how often, if ever, I assume this has happened, but are you seeing multiple compartments in a car? So I'm not talking about, all 4 doors being loaded, but, maybe some type of firewall, but you also have I don't know, somewhere else, some other compartment in the exhaust tunnel or something like that, where you're seeing multiple different areas with a constructed compartment?
I would consider it more rare, but it does happen.
Yeah.
And I've heard many stories of multiple compartments. We've hit a few through the years, but for the most part, once we find the compartment, that's it. I was actually just on a chat string today, and they were talking about a bus that Jeremy Ellison hit, and he said he found something like 7 compartments in the bus, and it was like the last compartment that he found was the one that was loaded. And it just goes to show, like, you got to continue searching. There's been an instance on my team where we did a stop for an agency, and we found something like $50,000 in the vehicle. Let the car, took the money. They disclaimed it. So we did a seizure and let them up the road. Well, they get to Mexico, and then the informant calls the informant handler who asked us to do the stop and says, "Hey, you guys missed like $500,000. It was in this other compartment." So we're like, "Oh shit!" Like, we found the little one, and then we let them go with the rest. Or so, I mean, it happens.
Well, the reason I bring it up is, well, for one, I've fallen victim to that certain case as well. And I want to tell these guys, like, hey, if you do find one compartment, that's good, but make sure you clear the rest, or you're searching even further, a little bit further. I had a really cool smuggler, actually, that we found the compartment on the side of the road, or we found that the doors were loaded on the side of the road. And we bring it to a shop, and he's in a patrol car of another unit. And while he's in the patrol car of the other unit, somewhere near the area we're searching, we get all 4 doors unloaded. We're high-fiving, hey, good work, and we're about to close up shop. And the actual suspect, the smuggler's yelling at me from the unit, and the window's down, and he's like, "Hey, Brown, I just wanted to make sure, like, I understand you got all the 4 doors, but did you find the compartment in the dash?" And of course, I was like, I wasn't going to admit to him. I was like, "Oh yeah, we're not done searching. We definitely noticed that there's some issues going on with the dash. We're about to pull it apart right now, but I appreciate it." He's like, "Yeah, man, I just want to make sure you understood, because there's another 15 keys in there that runs all the way down." And I'm like, "Hey, yeah, appreciate you, man." So
Yeah,
a really cool smuggler actually ended up giving us a lot of good info, and it was an interesting case of that guy. But yeah, he saved me there. And there's been other instances where we found it, in luggage. And, well, I say I will point to me. I found it in luggage, high-fived, booked them in, and then later on found out that we missed, and this is a common topic and story in my class, but I missed an additional 20 pounds in a void because I was happy with what I found in luggage. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's happened to us. And the one thing for us is, once we find dope, it's game on. Like, and that's when you really learn the car too, because we rip the car apart. Like, once we get done, the car is fully searched, and so hopefully we don't miss anything. So, but that just comes from having those experiences where you have missed things, or we had one where we hit like 100 pounds in this car, and we're like, "Oh, this is probably all it is," and end up finding out that we missed another 50 pounds in a certain area, and so then we got to go back and search the car again, and we're like, "How did we even miss this?" But
sure, but happens, I guarantee you. It's not going to happen again, right? In my specific instance, it was we found 6 or 7 pounds or whatever in the suitcase, and ultimately missed the entire tailgate. And basically, it was just what they couldn't fit in the tailgate. And I will tell you, when I stop a pickup truck, I will never not search another tailgate again. You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
You make that mistake.
I have a good story about that. One of my mentors, he recently had a load, and it was rocker panels. And so the way that they work the rocker panel, and I guess I'll explain it a little bit more for people that don't know what a rocker panel is, but it's a hollow void that is at the base of the floor on the outside of the vehicle, basically right under the driver and passenger door, and it runs from the rear wheels to the front wheels. It's essentially a tube. So there's access to these rocker panels from the rear wheel well, the front wheel well, or the B pillar typically. Or sometimes they'll cut holes into them from the side, but those are typically the access points. Well, this particular vehicle had access points from both the front and rear. And what this DTO was doing is they were leaving obvious tampering on the front access points. They were partitioning off the rocker panels right around in the middle, like near the B pillar. They were only loading the rear, and then the rear, they were doing a real good job with covering up their tampering.
Wow.
So this vehicle was going through the border every day. He was getting secondary because he had compartments, and they knew that he had compartments. They would look in the front rocker panels, see that it's clear, and send him up the road. And it wasn't until one of my mentors ended up stopping him, and he searched the rear rocker panels, figured out that they were loaded. And he talked to the guy, and he's like, oh yeah, they're loaded pretty much every day. And every day they secondary me. Every day they look at the front and they don't find the rear. And so It just goes to show, like, once you know that there's a compartment, it's like you got to clear the whole car. You got to search everything.
That's interesting.
I can only imagine how much dope that guy ran, because they would just look in the front and not even clear the rear.
That's crazy.
That's some sophisticated stuff.
What's up, everybody? I want to take just a second here and remind all LEOs who are listening to this podcast to get signed up for the LEO Network. Owned and operated by a full-time LEO, this platform is built for you. Discounts in police gear, largest LEO training calendar available, course recommendations, and a lot more. Training companies. LEO Network handles all the certificates for your attendees and has some of the best features coming out that'll make your job 1,000,000 times easier. Check them out at leonetwork.com.
Yeah.
So you're also a canine handler, and let's talk a little bit about that as far as what type of dog you have, male, female, what's its name, how often do you use it? Is the canine completely instrumental in your success? And do you think that you would still be successful without the canine?
All right, that's a lot there. So he is a
answer all of it, please. I don't want to repeat myself.
He's a 4-year-old German short hair pointer, or
Nice.
maybe almost 5. I've had him since 2020. His name's Milo, and he is a handful. Like he's really good when he wants to be, and every once in a while he's got if it's a little bit too hot out, he's like, I don't feel like working today. But for the most part, he's really good. Would I need him to be successful? No. In fact, he takes me off the road quite a bit because I have to go to training every week. And if I didn't have him, I would be on the road. He's definitely come in handy, when I have somebody that doesn't want to give consent. He will give me probable cause to get into the car if there's odor there and he detects it. But I don't think there's ever been something where he's alerted or indicated and I wouldn't have found it myself. So he's more of essentially like a PC machine. Like he's he's what I bring to the table. He's the tool that I bring to the table when somebody says that I can't search their car and I think that they're involved in criminal activity and I think that there's dope in their car, is essentially what it is. The hotly debated topic of whether or not you deploy the dog when you get consent. I'm one of the guys that deploys the dog. I don't see a downside to it. I know that there's people out there that do see a downside to it, but if I get consent, I deploy the dog. If he alerts and indicates, then, they can't revoke, and it just doubles up my reason for search. Because I've learned the hard way. I have a story where I asked for consent to search, and I asked in a way that wasn't clear, I guess you could say. And I basically said, do you mind if I search your car? And she says, yes. and so the defense is, well, yes, she minds that you search the car. And so I was kind of screwed there. I'm like, well, we could tell based on her body language that she's giving consent, but she's got a really solid defense. Unfortunately for her, Milo indicated to her car, and that saved me essentially during a suppression hearing. But yeah, I am one of the guys that deploys the dog all the time. Initially, it was because I was new. I was a new handler, and I was trying to expose him to as much as I could. So I wanted him out, and I would run him as much as I can. As it stands now, if I get a car stopped and I'm at all questioning whether or not something's there, and I hate to even admit this, that sometimes I search a car when I'm like wishy-washy on whether or not they're involved, but I'm like, well, I got them stopped, and I know there's probably not going to be a compartment based on the circumstances of the stop, so I'll just basically check the trunk, that type of search. Usually I won't deploy them on something like that. Like I'll just go look real quick and move on with the stop. But yeah, what was one of the other questions about him?
I think you covered them all. Everything? I know I fired a lot at you, but I think you covered them all. And I just to comment on what you're saying, like, yeah, I've heard, back and forth on what people do. A lot of times when you get consent, there's a scope to consent. And another reason for when you would run your dog alerts. I mean, that's PC to basically tear that thing down to the frame. And, there is a scope of consent, and they consented. Yeah, Jeremy, you can search my car. But at the same, when they said that, they're not necessarily saying, yeah, unbolt my manifold and slit open the sidewall of my spare tire. So with the dog alert, you eliminated, like what you said, is they now are not going to revoke, and also widens up the scope a little bit. So I don't see anything wrong with it. I think it's, to each their own.
Yeah, I believe. So. I think you're right. I see where it works in your favor.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Same way. Right on. Well, what else do we have? You have anything else? Other questions that you're going to bring up?
So are you, is there any, excuse me. Is there any traps or compartments that there's like, you're starting to see the same ones, or trends right now that's hot? I know in my career, I've seen traps come and go, like with external fuel tanks, for instance. They kind of get hot and everybody starts hitting them, and then they shut down a little bit, and here they come again. But are you seeing any trends like that you can tell us about without exposing too much that you've come across that's happening right now, or things that are cycling?
So here's my thoughts on that. I tend to think that trends are because people start looking for it, and it's always been there. Like somebody might hit a gas tank load, and then they're like, oh, gas tanks are hot, and they start really inspecting all the gas tanks, and all of a sudden they're hitting more gas tanks. And so to me, it's like, I can't think of any specific trends. I think that if you if you start to only look for certain things, you're gonna go down that rabbit hole of not searching the whole car. And like I do the same thing. There's certain cars that you see, and like take a Nissan Sentra, for example. Everybody knows that they love to exploit the floors on those. So if you pull over a Nissan Sentra and you only go for the floors, you're going to miss the dash compartment or the exhaust tunnel compartment or the bumper compartment. And so I really try, like when I talk to people about compartments, I really try to be like, you just have to search the whole car. And you'll see people post online all the time of, oh, I have whatever car stop, your make, model. And it's like, I can't help you. Like, you have to search the whole car. You have to clear every single void. We've been hitting recently these Chevy Silverados with firewall compartments where you have to remove the entire dash to get to the firewall, and the firewall is on the inside of the windshield. So to access it, every single dash bolt has to come off. You slide the dash back a couple inches, and that'll give you access to the compartment. You can't see the compartment. Well, you can see the compartment from the engine compartment if you know what you're looking for, but I don't know too many people that like can look in the fresh air intake channel of a vehicle and be like, oh, that's modified from non-factory, if they do a good job on it. obviously you're going to see the different types of paint and the inconsistencies and the dust and things like that. But these ones that they're building are actually pretty good. And when we were first looking at it, we're like, we didn't know that was non-factory until what we did is we brought a factory vehicle over and we just sat side by side and picked every little part of it to figure out what exactly they modified. So anyways, we hit 2 of those maybe a month and a half ago, and then we hit another one, and then we hit another one. And as far as we know, there's no link that we can find. Obviously, it's probably the same compartment builder down south, but I don't know if those are hot right now or what it is. But I know that every time I see a Chevy Silverado right now, I'm like, I get a little bit excited, and but I try not to do that. It's just I really feel like what's going to happen is that Chevy Silverado is going to drive by and it's going to be nothing, and I'm paying attention to it, but it's the car right behind them that's loaded. And because I was, I had this bias of looking at the Chevy Silverado because we've hit a bunch of them, I'm going to miss something else. So I really try to keep an open mind on that, and just I can't think of any specific trends. It's anything and everything.
Well, it sounds right. I mean, it makes sense to me. I mean, as soon as you hit something, you start focusing and go in that direction. Of course, you're going to become successful in that.
Yeah, man. It's like when people post on the Facebook group, like, a load out of a pilot car, like, hey, I stopped this pilot car and I hit a load out of it, post it to the Facebook group. How many pilot cars are going to be on the side of the road that day?
I know.
Yeah. My buddy, one of my good friends, he's really good. He hit a Honda Pilot not that long ago, and he will text me pictures of Honda Pilots every day. And every time, like, I'm on the phone with him and we're both working the highway, he's like, oh, there's a Pilot, I got to go chase it down. I'm like, okay.
And that's what happens, dude. We start to condition ourselves. We talk about that a little bit in our 2-day class, because I talk about, an instance where I get a call from a county over that's like, hey, we just hit a good one. And I'm like, sweet, what'd you get? And they're like, it's like 60 pounds of meth. I'm like, nice, dude. What was it in? And he's like, it was a Subaru. And I'm like, a Subaru? And he's like, yeah, it was a Subaru. And I'm like, was it green? And he's like, yeah, it was green. I'm like, did it have damage on the back bumper? He's like, yeah, dude. And I was like, did it have a luggage rack on top, or a luggage storage case on top? He's like, yeah. I'm like, dude, I didn't even see it. Like, good hit, man. Like, I'm like, oh gosh, I just watched that go on by, because Subarus to me are, a bunch of body odor and some personal use weed and patchouli oil, and it's not my type, but there you are.
I just had that same conversation with Matt Butler. He works the 7 hours north of me, and we were talking about it one day. I'm like, bro, Subarus don't smuggle. Like, this is what it is. Like, I don't even bother. I don't even look at them. Subarus don't smuggle. And he's like, what are you talking about? We hit Subarus all the time. And then it wasn't, but like a day or two later, they hit a Subaru with a bunch of money in it. And I'm like, man, I'm going to have to start looking at Subarus, I guess.
And I think that's what happens a lot of times with rental vehicles too. Like, a younger interdictor, will start off with an easy pick of a rental car, and then they start to condition themselves of rental. And it's like, hey, you're doing great. Don't just paint yourself into a corner to where
exactly
that's all you're looking for, though. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But because you've hit it over and over and over, that's when you start to condition yourself. And then you're not looking at the Subarus or, the personal vehicles and stuff like that. So.
I started doing that. I work right outside of Camp Pendleton. And so there's all sorts of military people, and with out-of-state plates, like, a lot of people across the country, when they're doing interdiction, out-of-state plate is great because you're looking for a traveler. But for me, when I see it, I automatically think, oh, it's military. And I don't even look at it. And then all of a sudden, in one of our investigations, it pops up that some car from Kansas came out here and picked up a whole bunch of dope. And I'm like, I wouldn't have even looked at it because it's from Kansas, and I would have just assumed military. Yeah. So now I'm at least, like, when I'm on, if I see an out of state, I'm looking to look at the person and be like, is that military person or is that somebody else?
Yep. Yeah, so that's a common mistake. I think I call it a mistake. It's not a mistake, but it's part of that conditioning, like you're saying. Not just vehicles, but plates as well. And what an easy fix that is for a high-level drug trafficking organization to realize, hey, they're targeting Southwest border plates. We're going to switch it up to this, or so a lot of people get caught up on the plates when in reality, people are stopping Alaska plated vehicles, Hawaii plated vehicles that are loaded. So, you just never know. You can't just focus on that. And it's more so, it just speaks to, the interview itself, or the conversation you have with the driver, and being familiar with, like you were talking about with compartments, realizing the normal versus not normal. And that same goes when you're having conversations with those on the roadway, and getting more familiar with what's consistent with those who are involved in drug smuggling or the transportation of illegal contraband versus the normal traveler. And that's what's important, really.
Absolutely.
What type of car is going down the highway.
The interview or conversation or whatever you want to call it is absolutely the most important part. Obviously, searching a car is important. Stopping the right car is obviously important, but being able to talk to people and being able to detect deception and determine if it's or at least have suspicions that you have a cover story, and being able to pick apart those different things is what's going to save you a lot of time. Like when one of my main rules that I try to teach, and I break this rule all the time, but the rule is still a good rule, is only search a car if you think that you're going to find something. So meaning you stop the car, you had a good behavior change or whatever, you interview the person, you think that they're involved in criminal activity, and at this point, I think I'm going to find something, so I'm going to want to search the car. Don't be in the habit of stopping somebody because whatever reason, you say you're working in Arizona and you see a California plate and you're like, oh, I'm going to stop it because California plate. And then once you get them on the shoulder, you're talking to them and you're not really getting anything from the interview. Don't be the person that's like, screw it, I'll just ask them for consent anyways. They're out of California, I should search their car. You're going to waste a lot of time doing that. It's really important. Not only are you going to waste your time, but you're going to waste their time, and you're going to be searching people's cars that might be pro law enforcement people. Like we kind of have a bad image right now. We need to be trying to I guess use our powers as judiciously as possible. Like don't go searching random people's cars. Like wait until you have reasonable suspicion and you think that you're going to find something, and then search a car.
Right.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I think we have said that over and over and over in our classes and throughout, our time as instructors, is like, hey, we don't even search cars unless we are reasonably suspicious. You're going to waste time if you don't.
Yeah. Wasting their time and yours.
Yeah. I've only had it one time. Well, one time that I can pretty much confirm that I would have let a load go. I stopped this lady, and there's a language barrier. She speaks Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. And, so I'm like trying to fumble through it. And it was before I had a translator app on my phone, which still, I don't really feel like that works that well. But anyways, just her mannerisms and the way that she was laughing and not nervous at all. Like, everybody's like, oh, they're not nervous. Like this lady was not nervous at all. And she had 80 pounds in her car. But anyways, at the end of my conversation with her, it just made sense. She had these short trips down into Mexico, and she explained that she was going down there to buy a house. And on face value, I was like, well, that makes sense. Like, you go down there for basically a day and you're house shopping, and then you come back. So I ended up cutting her, and I started walking back to my car. And as I'm walking back to my car, I see something that I like about the rear of the vehicle. And I'm like, oh shit, I think there might be something there. So I go back and talk to her, get consent to search the car. And lo and behold, there was a trap in the back of this Tahoe that you could see from the outside. And it had like 80 pounds of dope in it. And it was like, that was the only time that I've ever had a confirmed instance where I think I would have let somebody go based on not like picking up the right signals. But other than that, it's like, I can't tell you how many times I've thought to myself, I'll just search it, and I never find anything.
Right.
Like I've never just been like, I'll just search it, and then pop the trunk and there's dope in there.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't happen. Like,
right.
You don't get lucky. Every time that I've hit a load, like I've known, I've walked up to the car knowing I'm going to find something, or at least being pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
Love that confidence. I love that feeling too. Once you get done with everything and you either have consent or PC, it's like, it's here.
Yeah.
Well, I think this has been a great podcast, man. We've really enjoyed you on. I think it's one of our most educational. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Where can we find you? What's your Instagram? We know you teach for street cops. Where else can we can locate you and find some more information on your content and your classes?
Yeah, you can just search my name on Instagram or Facebook and find me on there. And then, you just go to the street cop page. I got classes all around the country. The one thing is I still work full time, so I don't get to teach that often. So, one thing that I hear all the time is people are like, oh, well, it's an hour or two away, so I can't make it. And I try to tell people, I'm like, look, man, like I'm only going to be in that area once. And, I'm not going to be back there until 2 years from now. So if you want this class, you're going to have to make the drive sometimes.
Yep.
It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. The other thing is go into as much training as you can. Like I really hope that people don't just want to go to my class, that they go to all sorts of different trap finding classes out there, because you need to see different perspectives and different ways of clearing vehicles. Like my way is not the best way. So I really hope that people are going out there and educating themselves the best that they can. And not only going to training, but going out and practicing. Like that's one of my rules is you have to go out and practice searching cars. It's something that you can do any day. Like you can't practice your target selection. You can't practice your interviews really without going out and stopping cars, right? But you can practice searching cars pretty much every day. You can go out, you can find an undercover that has a car. You can go out and search whatever fleet of vehicles that your department has. You can go to a junkyard, all sorts of different options. You can rent a car and search the cars, learn what's normal and what's not normal, and educate yourself so that you're not wasting people's time when it comes down to it.
Excellent advice.
Yeah, great advice. Well, again, we appreciate you, man. Go to the Street Cop page, find his recent training or where he's training throughout the nation. Get to his class. I'm telling you, we got a taste of his class at the Street Cop conference this year. Mind-blowing stuff. Very good. Is probably one of the best in the nation. He won't tell you that, but I'll tell you that. And we appreciate you, man. Thank you for joining the podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
You bet.